thanks so much for coming out and seeing this movie in a theater. My name is Janelle Riley. I'm so thrilled to welcome tonight's guest. She is, of course, the filmmaker whose previous films include Raw and Tan. Welcome, Julie. Ducournau.
I think they liked it. Thank you so much for being here. I'm not the best with like baseball metaphors, but as a director, you're batting 1,000. Like you've never made like less than spectacular movie.
It's so nice to know what that means though. Non-baseball fans. I guess it's good.
Yeah, you got a perfect track record.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
The funny thing is, I'm not even sure I know what it means because, but someone would have corrected me, I'm sure. I was thinking out about so many things, but really what struck me was how meaningful, though difficult, to be reminded of, the stigma around a disease like this. To be honest, I'm not sure I've seen a film that really addressed that in this way. Why was it important to you to, show us that and examine that?
That's a good question. Now I'm thinking about what you said. I'm not sure I saw a movie do this like this.
Yeah.
I think in so many ways, all the movies that have been made, especially in the 80s and 90s, about AIDS have been done that very much. Obviously thinking about Los Carax, Maupassant, Les Nuits Fauves, Philippe Collard, these are two very prominent French directors. In some way, not in some way, in some right, Philadelphia in 95 as well.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that's pretty notable, though, I believe, is that between, let's say, mid-90s to early 2010, it felt like there was a huge black hole about this history, this piece of history. It feels that nothing has been, repaired. And we just, assumed that it would go away and that we would forget. The fact that the entire world went through a crazy ethical, moral, human drawback at the time. And this drawback for the youngest ones in the audience was very real and palpable. You could feel it everywhere. You could feel it when politicians were speaking, you could feel it at the news at night, you could feel it in schools. I felt it in my school. Someone would bleed because they fell. No one would talk to them for 2 days or more. Having AIDS was actually a slur at the time. So that was a terrifying time and very dark age as I remember it. And this dark hole in the history of arts, generally speaking, is also quite sad, in many ways. And then recently there has been a constellation of artists who came back with this topic at the same time as I did when I was in Cannes. Carla Simon, who's an extremely good director, that I really love what she does, and her previous feature also focused on that. And she also has a very personal history with the disease. And so she made a second film about it as well. Christophe Honoré in France made a play that called The Idols, about all the writers, the great writers that we lost to AIDS, and also their fight against the oblivion, of their friends and of themselves as well. And it has come back, and I really always think that when you think that you're focusing, when you're writing something, you think you're focusing on a topic that is personal, that is specific, and you feel you're alone in that. You feel like, why would other people care? And sometimes in Q&As I've had these questions, like, why do you make this about this disease right now, or about this society, let's say, because I don't call it disease per se, because I don't use the actual symptoms of AIDS in the film, but in the way society treats the patients in my film is definitely stems from that age. And I think it's outstanding, this question, why do you do it now? Because again, there has been no reparation, so there is some kind of it always comes back. Like the more things are left taboos and unsaid, the more the trauma grows, the more it trickles down, and the bigger it becomes, you know. So there is a need to verbalize and to name and to recognize what happened at that time. And so yeah, all this to say like I think what was your question again? Like that to circle that's gonna happen a lot, just so you know.
Why was it important to sort of, address this now?
Well, that's the thing. So basically, obviously, we're living through a very dark age right now. We all know it. We don't know when we'll reach rock bottom. Probably it's not yet the case. Kind of hoping for rock bottom at this level, really. Like, I'm like, let's rebound.
Just get us there.
Yeah, just get us there, because it's really it's torture, really. And it has been lasting for a long time now already. And it's just, I feel that the emotion that we all feel every day when we wake up and we read the news or we watch the news, and this sense of shock that we are living in and of powerlessness, this is something that it needs to be addressed, okay? I think mostly our governments expect us to be constantly distracted and think about something else. I mean, that would be the best case scenario for them, that we don't address that. And social media is there for this, definitely. Doom scrolling, all this. Let's not talk or think about what is actually happening. The thing is that I'm not on social media, so I tend to think about it a bit obsessively. And these emotions that I feel and that you feel as well right now, probably, I needed to categorize them. But I can't fictionalize our present. Because our present is our present. I don't have any distance. I'm like you. I am not a sociologist, I'm not like, an expert in politics or whatever. I have no clue where this is going, all I know is that it's bad. And yet I'm left with these emotions. So I think like very instinctively, because of that, because of my incapacity of fictionalizing our present, I was drawn back to the first time that I really felt not only like let down by society, because that's really a big understatement, but like feeling that society was cannibalizing itself, that we had come to an end.
Yeah.
Like in one way or another, our civilization had come to an end. And this was in the 90s because of the reaction towards the patients during the peak of the AIDS crisis, and because of the way fear see through every single crevice of society, creating a society where we were all alone. Like that we were disposable. Everyone could disappear and the world wouldn't care. And worse than that, you would disappear and you would be shamed for that because of your lifestyle or just because somehow you deserved it, And I think that's why I did it now, because this film was not made to be now. It was in my head. I had it for a very long time in my head, and I thought it would be my last film, or at least that I would need to be 70 to have the necessary distance to it. And life happened, shit happened, and I decided to do it now.
Yeah. And this idea, sure. Yeah, you're right. When I'm old enough to remember when the AIDS virus, when there was the panic, there was a lot of like media about it, like telling people not to panic. But I look back on it, people look back on that period, and I watched this with my nephew who's very young, and I had to explain that this is no exaggeration.
Absolutely.
If anything, I did underplays it.
That is so true, and sometimes I'm a little bit taken aback because I've been touring with the film in Europe for the past 5 months, 6 if you count Cannes, and I've been blessed with great audiences, great questions, lots of curiosity, and the interesting thing is that my audience is usually pretty mixed, and because this one, for once, is not forbidden for young people under 16 in France or in Europe, it's only under 12. So I had an even younger audience, right? Which is it's really new for me. And this younger audience, many times it happened. I mean, again, it's not ignorance or anything. It's just I think about this black hole that I was talking about, and the fact that there were no, no politician, no one took ever on themselves to say something really, really unethical happened at the time, and it spread out, in the world. And so they used the word, talking about the film, dystopian. And that left me very perplexed every time. I'm like, obviously my film is not realistic, that's clear, but the atmosphere of it is absolutely, as you say, not only not an exaggeration, but was really the daily life. And even if you like leave aside the reaction to the disease itself, the thing is that at the time, in every time where fear takes over every social fabric, every part of the social fabric and destroys it, obviously xenophobia, homophobia, and misogyny are going to be the first thing that rise up. And at the time it was extremely, like banal, mundane. It was extremely inhibited. All this, and the scene, for example, where the students tells the slur, the F slur, to the teacher because he's gay, in front of everybody, and that the reaction of the class is to laugh at it, laugh with the students. It's something that I want to say, fortunately, in a way, this younger audience did not buy. And I had to explain to them that that was so common at the time. And this situation I've lived, like literally I've lived. And I remember having an amazing teacher when I was young, when I was 8, who was gay and who actually had to, before we went to class, in September, when we went back to class after holidays, he had to summon all the parents. And he said, listen, I'm gay. If you have a problem with that, with having your kid in my class, then you can move your kid now from my class and put it in another class with another teacher. So by the way, this teacher is that just changed my life. He was one of the smartest and bravest person I've ever met, and he was the only adult telling us the truth about AIDS at the time, the only one. And a lot of people moved their kids. Like a lot of them. It was just because he was gay, he was suspicious of, being at the source of the transmission whatsoever. And that was absolutely like unapologetic and almost normal, the fact that he had to summon them, It's crazy.
Wow. This, I don't know if metaphor is the right word, but the way you choose to portray this disease with, people turning to stone, to marble, it's so visually stunning. I'm kind of wondering how you hit upon that. Was there a specific inspiration, and how did you pull it off? Because I didn't know if it was all practical or if there's some special effects involved.
So this idea was there from the beginning. I think the meaning is pretty obvious. Marble being a noble material, I wanted to, somehow sanctify and elevate the lives and deaths of those that have been considered and deemed lesser by society. Again, because they had the big flaw of being sick and of needing help. So which is insane when you think about it. And so I wanted to use this material that is usually used for saints and kings in cathedrals for them. And in that way, kind of like putting them in a verticality that I think they deserved in many ways, because as we know also, like what I tell in the film is, obviously, it's the story is an intimate story of a family, but we also see all the patients. And we know that there is a political aspect to all this, obviously, and the abandonment of the government, and that we see through the staff of the hospital or the principal, of the school who represent the institutions, is something that is deeply political and problematic. And so, in that sense, I wanted to use, let's say, an iconic imagery in order to kind of like, break this political abuse almost towards them, and create a form of monument as well to their memories, which the red, is to me. can mean anything you want to use. I mean, interpretation is open, but that's what it means to me very much. Like they stay under our skin, like the wind like blows away and helps you move on, but they also stay under your skin. And so the effects that I use are both practical and CGI. It's really half-half. It was a very excruciatingly long process to just try to fathom whether it was doable or not. Bear with me, the budget of the film was 10 million, which in France is a lot, but I believe here not that much, and also considering the number of both practical and CGI that there is in the film was not a huge budget. Because weirdly enough, this is the film that I've made where the effects are the least visible, and yet they are the most of them. Like the CGIs are everywhere. The idea was that my head of makeup molded Tahar, obviously, because I mean he's the one who bears the most prosthetics by the end. Of course, the actor who plays the teacher's partner, and all the extras that you see who have prosthetics. So they were molded, and there was makeup at one point, like especially during the bar scene, where there were a lot of extras. There were like 25 makeup artists on set, and they were like, the rush was crazy because this is extremely precise makeup. But the prosthetics are made of silicone. Silicone is soft and matte, doesn't reflect light, and every time the extras, all the actors would move, then the silicone would move with them, which obviously doesn't convey this stone-like aspect. So what we had to do with CGI was to rigidify every single movement of all the actors and the extras who had prosthetics to start with. Meaning, for example, at the end when you're with Tahar, when he's dying, so he's lying on his deathbed, and he would breathe, obviously, although Tahar made the greatest effort to try to be in apnea constantly. And he did well, but that was not enough, and obviously I didn't want him to choke on set. But so we would see his torso kind of going up and down, obviously, at one point. So we had to rigidify this in order for it not to be visible. And every single speck of light that there is on his body or on the partner's body or on any extra's body, for example, during the protest that there is in front of the hospital, they had to add not only specks of light, but they had to make them move in order to get that polish, this believable polish that you have on recumbering effigies, in churches and whatever. But because these people are still alive, they're still moving, they're still like very much, we had to invent the movement of the light according to the light that Ruben, my DP, created on each set. And until the very end of post-production, it was a big bet. Like, we needed to have faith. We had been working on this for a year because we started talking about him way ahead of preparation, not knowing where to start, and how to tackle it. And until the very end of post-production, we were still not sure what the result would be.
Yeah.
But so it was extreme, it was a huge challenge and a huge accomplishment for us.
I mean, your films are always visually stunning, but I love your actors. They're always fantastic. And I mean, obviously, Tahar and Golsheep are amazing established actors. You had to find your alpha. And it's a tall order. Were you ever worried you wouldn't find your lead actress?
Well, when you want to work with newcomers, you're always worried this. You're always worried that you're not. I mean, it's not that you're not going to find because you're always not. Ultimately, you will, but you're worried that it's going to last 2 years. Which, again, like in terms of just pure making of the film, would delay everything and would be very problematic. But it always lasts quite long. Like even for Titan. When I met Sagat for the first time, she hadn't done anything before, and I met her after 6 months of casting. It was a long process of casting, and these castings are always also generally pretty precise. In the case of Alexia and Titan, I casted both men and women for the part. The idea was that the person had to be androgynous, to fit the fluidity of the character. But I didn't care which gender they belonged to, as long as their appearance and obviously their potential as actors, because that's the first thing actually that we should think about is their potential worked, you know. And for Alpha, I'm considering that the disease that I talk about in the film is bloodborne, like AIDS, and that I was talking about the 13-year-old. The question of the birth of sexuality in such a context was crucial to me to tackle. Because this is also one of the trickle-down effect that this trauma, this worldwide trauma that we went through had, that I come from a generation that started their sexuality in fear and in guilt. Like the idea that even just thinking about sex would make you a potential murderer in some ways. And it's crazy to think that this happened less than 25 years, because I consider a generation to be 25 years, less than a generation after the sexual liberation that my parents or boomers went through in the 70s, and where the equality of gender somehow, you know, arose, and where sex was seen as something that was actually extremely healthy and in an honest way. Yeah, it's shared by everybody. We all have a sexual life, no matter what it is, in various different places of the spectrum. And at the time, this was acknowledged. And 20 years later, we went back to this kind of very dark age, dark age thinking that sex was taboo, bad, and synonym with death, and probably, very loose lifestyle in many ways. And I remember at the time being a woman, a young woman. I mean, again, the slut slurs and all these were extremely common. And let's not even mention for the homosexual community. That is obviously a given, and we all know that. But I needed to tackle this subject for that reason. I was not comfortable working with a minor. Because even if there is no nudity in the film, there is a proximity of the bodies that was essential, because in the fantasy of the society that is present here, any contact or even like breathing the same air as someone who could potentially or who is rumored to have been infected is already a catastrophe and the cataclysm in itself. So there had to be proximity of the bodies and all this, and there had to be the idea that my characters, in their birth of sexuality, the birth of their desires, were breaking a social taboo. So I decided to cast young women who just simply looked way younger than their age. She was 19 when we shot. And so we looked everywhere, ballerinas, athletes, swimmers, all kind of activities that kind of require petite physique. And she's none of that. That's the funny part. Because Melissa is none of what I just said. But that's what made her perfect for the part, because she has a very natural clumsiness to the way she holds herself. And she's a very big awkwardness, and she's completely, disorganized. I mean, you tell her every time you tell her look right, she's gonna look left. Like just every time. We had 41 days of shooting. By half of it, I would say left to say right, because in order to get what I wanted. She's so clumsy, but this is so cute. And this is so endearing, and it does make her look way younger, just in that. I mean, physically she does, but just like playing with this, and obviously she's aware of that, or I made her aware of that, but we in any case decided to play on that a lot. I think make her let's say in the harshness of her character, because as all teenagers, she's angry. And she's angry also because she's being rejected, ostracized. She's having a hard time at school. She feels the injustice. And so obviously there is this scene that kind of heartbreak when she tells Amin that he's just a junkie, and that it's just because he's too much of a coward to commit suicide, and he just, doesn't dare, so he cries for help by being a junkie, which is the most horrible thing you could say to someone who is afflicted by addiction. but she doesn't know what she's saying really. And I think that when you write a scene like this, when I wrote it, I had issues writing this because the words themselves, kind of repelled me. Then you really have on the other side to really play and act on the fact that she is a baby-like. In order to kind of forgive this kind of words, kind of forgive also the harshness she has towards her mom, you need to really insist on the baby-like aspect, or at least, at the beginning of the film, before she starts her emancipation. Obviously, she's a very different character by the end of the film. So that was a long answer. Sorry.
No, before we go, I just want to ask if everyone can stay seated as Julia has to get to another one of these. But I do want to remind everyone this movie is going to be in theaters in America in March. Please spread the word. It's such a beautiful movie. Thank you so much.